Hello, good morning. Thank you, David. As you said, yep, I'm Oscar from Digital Fusion, and I'm here to talk to you about the illusion of simplicity and natural language queries in FileMaker. In particular, today I'm going to be talking about the Perform SQL script step, the Perform SQL Query by natural language script step. But first, a little bit about me. As you may have noticed, I'm not from New Zealand. I'm English. So I studied electronic engineering in the UK. As part of my degree, I spent a year studying in Victoria University of Wellington and just fell in love with New Zealand. Unfortunately, at the end of that year, I had to go back to the UK and finish my degree. This was also where I first got introduced to AI. My dissertation was a proof of concept for the National Archives in London, where I was doing a query by image content system. So you submit an image and it pulls back images that look very similar. Once I'd finished my degree, I actually worked on control systems for electric vehicles. So a company taking old Rolls-Royce Bentleys and converting them to EVs, and I was working on their control systems. Then in late 2022, I finally made the move back to New Zealand. And then later that year, I joined Digital Fusion and started working with FileMaker and AI. The reason I started working with AI there was FileMaker was just starting to bring out those semantic script steps. And with my history from my degree, I got to look at those first. More recently, Digital Fusion have started up AI Labs, which is our sort of AI research and development, and I'm heading that up. If you've looked at the Digital Fusion website, I've done quite a few recent blogs there on new AI features and things like that. So before I get into anything else, I thought I'd just do a little bit of a FileMaker AI timeline. So we've actually had an AI script step in there since 2020 with the configure machine learning model. Then we got all the semantic stuff, so embeddings, things like that. And then most recently, we've got all of our ones where you're actually able to interact a bit more with the large language models, get natural language responses back. And this is where the new Perform SQL Query script step has come in, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So we're going to talk about the Perform SQL Query because it's a bit more dynamic than the Perform Find by natural language. This allows you to have a prompt and pull data back from anywhere in your system. The find relies on a layout, on the fields being on that layout, things like that. So we're going to look at the Perform SQL instead, some possible use cases, how that script step talks to the large language model, and then we'll look at various different ways you can improve the results you get from that script step. So this was a little app assistant that's being powered by that Perform SQL Query by natural language script step. So you're able to ask a question and it's able to pull back that information. So this was done with the script step without adding any extra features, any extra detail to improve the results. And it did get me a result. There are 5,500 records in our contacts table, but we use a soft delete. So there's a status field in that table that is whether that record is active or deleted. So when a client is using this, they don't want to be told that there's extra records there that don't actually exist. They can't see them, they can't access them. So it's not quite as simple as just sticking this script step in and you can chat to your database. We're going to have to do some work to get that, to give you sort of valuable data back. So that's what we're going to look at today. So yeah, like I say, I'll take you through the script step, how to set it up, how it works talking to that language model, and then improving those results through a couple of different methods. So LLM comments and prompt templates. This does get a little bit technical, so I will say hold your questions till the end. There should be some time for questions at the end. And also, hopefully, if I've done my job right, a lot of those questions will get answered as I go through the presentation. And after this conference, we'll also sort of be releasing this presentation as another blog article on our website that you can refer back to. So that's the script step. It's one of these quite big ones. There's a lot of different parameters and options that you can set on it. So I'm going to take you through those. Some of them are pretty simple. The account name. So this is done, you need to, before any of, or most of these new script steps, you need to call the configure AI account script step. I should specify that you don't need to do that every time you're calling this script step. The configure AI account script step is a session-wide thing. So you call it once, and that will hold the information for your session. So you set the account name in there, you set your model provider and your API key, and then when you call the Perform SQL query, you pop the account name in there. Then the model, this is the model that you want to use for the query. It has to be a model related to that model provider that you set in the previous configure AI account script step. For a list of sort of compatible models or what FileMaker suggests, I would say go and look at their documentation. They've got a list of the models that they would recommend. The prompt, this is your user's question, how many contacts are in our system. This can be a variable or it could be a field, that's up to you. There is the options specified from, and there are two options here. You can set the options specified from list, which is what I'm going to be talking about, and that gives you the extra actions there and the data tables, and it also shows up, causes that stream checkbox to show up. The other way you can set them is from JSON, which allows you to pass in a JSON variable, JSON object that contains the action that you want to use or the various different tables that you want to give this script step sort of access to. So that's probably a more likely way you'll want to use it because you can set that dynamically in your script before, whereas the from list option means you have to go into the script and change those options on this script step itself. So the actions, you get 5 different actions available, and I've got a table there. So these are kind of responses you might expect from that little chatbot image I showed you. So you've got the query, which gives you the answer that it's got from those SQL queries, plus it's wrapped it in a bit of natural language. There's the query for data only, which whatever SQL it's used to get the answer, it feeds that answer straight back out to you with no padding around it. There are 2 SQL options here. The reason for that will become apparent a little bit later on, but in short, there's kind of a bit of back and forth between this script step and the large language model. So there could be a few SQL statements going back and forth. So the get SQL gets the very last statement that the LLM used to try and get the information you wanted, and the get first gets you the first SQL statement that the large language model used. And then finally, we've got Get DDL, which I feel is a little inappropriately named because what it's doing is getting you the database schema in the database, the data definition language. So yeah, it's the language that it's using to get you the table schema. So in this case, we've asked a question about the context. We've sent through information about the context table. So that's what's showing down there. And we'll go into the DDL a lot more detail later on. Then you can select the tables. So this is the that database schema that gets sent through. You probably don't want to be sending all of your tables, and it's actually table occurrences in the file you're in. So if you've got a sort of interface file and a data file, I'm sure you've got your data tables in your interface file, but you need them there if you want to use this script step with them. And that, yeah, gives you all of the tables on your relationship graph, and you just select the ones that you want to give access to. And then when this script step runs, it sends that database schema through to the large language model. Then we've got the checkbox options. So we saw the stream option yesterday. This is in a field. You'll see the text appearing as the large language model returns it. If you turn that on, if you turn it off, the text all comes through and gets dumped into the field all in one go. The prompt templates, even if you don't set up a prompt template, FileMaker is sending through a prompt on how the LLM needs to form these SQL queries. So it's doing that in the background. And later on again, I will discuss the configure prompt template script step and how that works to expose FileMaker's prompt and allow you to edit it and improve it. So once you've called that script step and given it a template name, it's very much like the configure AI account one. You stick the name in there. And again, this is a session one. You don't need to call it every time. You can call it once at startup and it will hold that template in memory for you. Then there are parameters. This is another JSON object. So you can set things like temperature, which is kind of the creativity of the large language model. You can set a max number of tokens that the model can use and things like that. I'm not really going to go into that stuff today. Then you've got your response target. Again, this can be a variable or a field. This is where the answer from the script step gets put. And then a very powerful part of this script step is the Perform JavaScript in Web Viewer. Probably not going to go into that much today, but that whole interface you saw with the messaging, all done in a web viewer. This allows you to set that web viewer object and call functions in it to update that chat window, things like that. So how's that script step interacting with the large language model? As I say, there was this kind of back and forth with the SQL statements, but the primary thing it does is send your prompt through, that's your question. It sends the DDL through, that's the database schema for all the tables that you want to access, and it sends these instructions through. That's the behind the scenes FileMaker prompt on how it should be forming these SQL queries. The LLM takes all of that information and it tries to form an SQL statement that it sends back to FileMaker. And in this case, you can kind of think of the large language model as an intern or an apprentice. They're going to do their best to answer you, but they've only got the information that you've sent through. So that first SQL statement might not work. FileMaker will run it, and even if there's an error, it'll return that result back to the LLM. So if it's created a bad SQL statement, it gets an error back and it says, oh, okay, I'll try and rewrite that. I'll do it a different way. And it sends another SQL statement. So those two SQL steps there could happen multiple times before you get a final result. So that's where those two Get SQL and Get First SQL come in. They let you see its first attempt and the final answer that it made. And then once it has got that final answer, the LLM will send back that final result, potentially with that extra natural language wrapped around it. So what's going with your prompt? We've mentioned the DDL, we've mentioned the prompts, but we haven't looked at them. So first we'll take a look at the DDL. Do not worry about trying to read all of that. My point here with this slide is if you've not set the LLM comments up or anything like that, it's going to send through everything in your table. So this is what it's sending through. You've got the table name, you've got every single field in that table, and you've got what that field is, whether it's an integer or a text field, and then when you're seeing at the end there is any comments that have been entered on that field. So that can be quite a lot of data to send through. And then we've got the prompts. So this is the behind the scenes FileMaker one that gets sent by default. It's a set of rules for how that LLM should be formatting those SQL queries. And a particularly important one at the bottom there is the schema. So that schema variable at the end there gets replaced by the database schema that we looked at on that previous slide. So how can we improve the results? How can we get that chatbot to return the actual number of active customers that we've got in our database? We can reduce the DDL. That's done by adding LLM comments. So the way to add LLM comments currently is just add LLM in square brackets at the start of your comment field. This may change in future, but that's currently how it's done. And when you add these LLM comments, that actually changes the way that FileMaker behaves in sending through that DDL. So once we've added, so this is using the Get DDL action on that script step. And as you can see, I've added that LLM comment, and now the only thing that's getting sent through is that record status. So this is really good because it reduces that context that the LLM is having to deal with. I'm sure in all of your tables you've got constants, you've got fields that are just used for relationships. These are of no use whatsoever to the model, so you don't want to be sending all that extra data through because it's data it doesn't need. And as you saw, that first DDL is very big. If you're sending multiple tables, that's a lot of tokens. So I think normally in my testing I might use a couple of dollars a week in tokens. When I was testing and sending through 6 or 7 tables, I used about $3 in an hour. So adding these LLM comments is quite important for reducing that context, reducing the cost. The other thing is if you've got sort of data sensitive data in your database, if you've got passport numbers, driver's licenses, anything like that, you don't want a client to necessarily be able to query that database and get someone's personal details back out of it. So by adding at least one LLM comment to a field in your table, you stop those other fields getting sent through. So the LLM doesn't know about them, it can't query them. So you're protecting your data as well. So let's see how it reacts with that reduced context. So this is the Get SQL action now. And if you know SQL, it's still just trying to get all of the records in my context table. It knows that there is a status field there, but all we've said in that LLM comment is that it's a record status. As developers, we've got the ability to go in and look at that field. We can see that, oh, that field only has active and deleted. I know that I only want to show active records, so we'll hide all the deleted ones. The LLM doesn't have that context. It knows that you've got a record status. Yay! But yeah, it doesn't know how to use that field yet. So this is where those LLM comments come in. You also need to sort of get a lot of context through to that LLM now. So if we go back and we update that comment, we say what the different statuses are and how they can be used. This gives the LLM that extra context to deal with the query. So now it's looking for all the records in my context table that are active. So we'll get back the correct number of contacts now. So here's a few examples of some bad LLM comments. A lot of these will kind of be around statuses, things like that. You might not need to do too detailed a comment on first name. It's a contact's first name. But if you've got a status or a type, like I say, you need to specify the values that can be in that field and then how that large language model can use them. In the case of phone numbers, they might come in different formats. You might have the spaces in there, you might have dashes, things like that. The LLM might need to know that to be able to search for phone numbers. It might try multiple different ways to search for a phone number that way. So, some better comments. As you can see, I've put in what the field is, what the various different values could be. For the phone number, I've said, you know, sometimes they do get put in with a country code, sometimes they don't. So then it might, you know, with that first SQL statement, it might try looking for a phone number with the country code. If it doesn't get an answer back, it can then try sending an SQL query without the country code to find that phone number. And yeah, like I say, you can go a step further with those status ones and say how you can use it. So how it should be treating an unfinalized, finalized, or cancelled invoice. So yeah, a few considerations. If you're wanting to use AI in your system, I think you should probably be adding at least one LLM comment to every table in your database, just in case you accidentally select that table in the list. If you're doing it dynamically and haven't thought about it too much and it picks a table that you haven't put an LLM comment in, that's a big DDL that's going to go through. That's a lot of tokens. That might be information you don't want the LLM to try and access. So it's probably worth having at least one in every table just to reduce any risk of things going wrong. And you know, it's going to help give that LLM the reduced context. It's going to help it be able to answer those queries. And then yeah, you really need to think about how you're writing these comments now. It's not just for other developers who can really dive into the system and look at what's there. You're having to get the whole context of your system, the structure, across to these LLMs now in your field comments. The other way we can improve the results is the prompt templates. So the configure prompt template script step is used to do that. Again, this works very similar to that configure AI account. You give the template a name. You want to make sure you pick the same model provider that you have in that configure AI account script step. There are actually different templates for the same script step for different models, because the different models will react differently to, like, they work in different ways, so they react differently to different different prompts. There are also different template types. So we're looking at the SQL query one. There is another template for the perform find by natural language and the perform RAG action. And then below that, we've also got two SQL prompts here, actually. So the one we've got here at the bottom is the natural language prompt. This is a simple, very short prompt on how that LLM should sort of return the result. For my testing and playing around with this, there was not a great deal of change. There wasn't much point in editing this. If it's International Pirate Day, you could add something in here so that your model returns everything talking like a pirate. But outside of that, I haven't found much use for this one myself. The more important one is that big SQL prompt. So this is one that, if you're going to, well, you probably want to keep the stuff that FileMaker have left in there, but you can add to it. And I think it's one that you will probably add to and modify over time. FileMaker's execute SQL uses quite a small sort of subset of SQL functions. So a lot of what this is doing is saying that, telling the LLM which SQL functions it can't use, because they will not work in FileMaker. So what I've done is add an extra rule, because I kept finding when I was asking for information over a date range, I was getting SQL statements using date trunc, which I don't know whether that's a valid SQL function or not, but it didn't work in FileMaker. So I added this rule to stop it using that function, and suddenly started getting much more reliable results. The other thing that you can add in this template is general information for your system. So with that record status, we've got that on every table, and ideally you should have an LLM comment on it in every table, but you could as it's on every table, add a rule here that tells the LLM how to use that field. So you're telling it once in the field comment, and then you're telling it here in a set of rules. You're just reinforcing that. As I say, the LLM doesn't know about your system. It's an apprentice. It's going to do its best, but the more you can help it, the better. So yeah, you might continue to build this up, add more rules and general information about your system to this prompt, and that will get sent through with all of your queries then. So yeah, bit of a summary. The natural language prompt, it's there. Once you've kind of got the script step returning answers the way that you want, you probably won't touch that one again. The SQL prompt is that bigger one. It's much more important for that SQL query structure and how the LLM is going to try and format those SQL queries for your database. And yeah, as I say, it's important you can give all this extra information about your system to the LLM. Bit of a summary of the whole thing now, but also a use case. So this is that same chat, but you could have multiple of these for different team members or something. So this could be for a salesperson preparing for a client meeting. They could have this as a sort of standalone app on their phone or whatever that's connected to the rest of the database and able to pull back information for them. So I've gone through, I've added all my LLM comments, I've updated that prompt template, and I've asked that in my prompt template, I've put an extra rule that if this template is being used, if someone uses the word prepare, or they're asking for information about a meeting with a client, that it pulls back that client's full name, any contact information it has, and the last meeting that I had with that person. So that's what those first two are. That's the details of the last meeting, and then not my real phone number. And then the other nice thing about the large language models and that natural language is it's been able to process that information that it's pulled back. It's processed that meeting note, and it's given me a little summary there of how I might want to prepare for this meeting and the topics that might come up in that meeting. So yeah, it's not just plug and play. You can't stick this in and hope it's going to work and you're going to get valuable data back from your database instantly. You are going to have to make sure that your solution is AI ready. You're going to have to go in and you're going to have to add these LLM comments. You're going to have to potentially change the way you write comments to get a lot more context across. And yeah, you're going to have to work on these prompt templates. You might find that, yes, the SQL query is contextless. It can pull data from anywhere. But for better results, you might want to look at context as well. So you might do a bit of pre-processing of a user's question and say, oh, okay, they've asked a question about contacts. Let's go find my contacts template and put that in there. Or they're asking information about invoicing. So we'll go and grab our invoice template and we'll use that. And yeah, with all of these, if you've formatted your LLM comments well, if you've got good prompt templates, you can really start to get back some valuable information through just chatting with your database.